Is the business that you own a private business or a family business? In this episode of The Leadership Hustle, we're going to discuss the difference between the two and how to make the transition. Hello, and welcome to The Leadership Hustle for executives whose companies are growing fast and need leaders who are ready. So, welcome back to this episode of The Leadership Hustle. I'm Andrea Frederickson.
And I'm Michelle Hill.
And I am so excited about today. When we were preparing for this episode, we were talking about what topic should we talk about, and incidentally, it was just accidentally, but we were both thinking of the same topic. So Michelle, you brought up this idea of family businesses, and there is probably, I don't know if there's a topic that I have more passion about than family business. So it's one of my favorites. So we're going to have to shut down this early so I don't keep rambling on today.
Yes.
But family businesses, probably one of my favorites. So
yes, that'd be an understatement. So with all that excitement, tell the audience why. Why does your passion exist? Because it doesn't matter where we're at, what we're doing. If it veers into that conversation, it's woo, Andrea's.
My face lights up.
It does.
I just get all jazzed about it. You know, I grew up in this little town in Iowa, and my dad started a company when I was in my early elementary years. And so I grew up in a family business. And I'm pretty sure he didn't start it off to be a family business. I'm pretty sure it was, what are we going to do? And we're going to make a living for the family kind of thing. And then through the years, you know, I didn't ever think about coming back to work in the business. That was not ever a thing. I went to college, I went to work at other places. I never thought about coming back. And eventually there was this discussion about us working together. And in the process, we were discovering, you know, our vision for the future was creating a business for our grandchildren's grandchildren. Meaning that it was going to be multi-generational in its legacy, but also that if people in the family wanted to come work, that was something that there was going to be an opportunity for. And how your brain works, like what you look for, you find.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And so as my dad and I were building the business originally, it was, and they're a family business, and the son and the daughter are working for their dad. And it's not as often that I see mom being the owner, although that does happen as well. It's usually dad and mom coming to work and bringing in the next generation, and the sister-in-law or the brother-in-law or the nieces or the nephews and all that stuff. And so it's just fun to watch how that all happens and watch the legacy build. And so I get excited about that.
You get very, very excited. Well, for our audience, because I think sometimes it's, where's the line, you know, of a privately held business versus a family business?
Oh, yeah.
You know, are we in a family business? Are we just privately held? Give us a little bit of structure in regards to what the two are and their differences.
Okay. So all family businesses are private. So a private business is owned by any entity other than the stock. You know, it's not sold on the stock market, right? Yeah. And so all family businesses are private. Now, the thing that is unique about this is family-owned businesses have the majority ownership by a family, and there's probably leadership of has family members on the leadership team or in higher management and what's going on. A family business doesn't necessarily have to have any more than the one owner, but also they're probably not quite ready to have people that are family on the leadership team. Mm-hmm. They may be dispersed across the organization, but they're not really making decisions about what's going on, but they're involved.
Yes.
Right? And so we'll find that families, most people, not all, but most people, when they start their business, they're starting it because they want to provide something, a livelihood for their family, something that they're excited about, something that they're passionate about, and so they start their business, not ever thinking about whether or not it's going to be a family-owned business, right? Yes. So this is so interesting. When we were preparing for this, you had just watched a recent episode of Landman.
Oh, yes.
And this is the one that has Jerry Jones, where he's talking to the guy in the bed because he just had another heart attack, right?
Yes.
And
So good.
So you brought this up. Why did you bring that episode up? Like, what hit you? Because you're like, oh my gosh, we should talk about this.
Well, with the Dallas Cowboys, it similar to what you were talking about, right? It's he talks about it was obviously unintentional, but every day is such a joy because he gets to not only go to work and do the things he loves, but while at the same time he gets to do it with his family, and he gets to see his children and grandchildren, them actually grow, and they get to together, work towards and work on something and collaborate, which you don't get to spend every day normally, right?
He's probably
so
the
passionate.
exception in this category in that he intentionally bought property, bought land so he could build a business, so he could work with his family, thinking he was going to be doing the favor for his kids when he was the one that was the beneficiary of getting to watch and getting to be a part of and not having to wish at the end of his life or toward the end of his life that he's not getting to be with his family.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so I think it's really important for people to recognize most businesses don't necessarily start off being a family-owned business. It's livelihood. It's a passion.
Yes.
It's an interest. It's a way to build wealth if done correctly, right? And so I think it's important to recognize there typically is a transition either by, if there's partners that you're bringing in family members into the business or, and what does that mean?
Yes. Well, so because you've said a couple things here. You've talked about family businesses more often than not, are unintentional. And then there's the transition, right? So I think we probably hit a little bit on, them being unintentional. Why? Because we start for that livelihood and so forth. But what are the things if I own my own business or I'm a partner in a group of individuals that own a business collectively and we're privately held, what are some of those signs? What are those things that as we're not intentionally trying to be a family business, but what are the signs that maybe we're starting to drift in that direction?
So most often what I notice is there's a teenager coming up into the family, whether it's your teenager, whether it's your niece or nephew, whether it's your partner's kids, but they need a summer job.
Yes.
Whatever the summer job is, whether it's sweeping the floor, being the custodian, whether it's organizing documents, whether it's doing something technology-wise, but there's something that teenager is doing to earn money, earn cash, right? And this is a way that it can be done through the business. It's not coming out of mom or dad's pocket specifically, and they're gaining experience in the business. So if you start noticing the kid, right? That's usually the
Someone's
first one.
kid.
Somebody's kid related to the ownership is in the business. That's usually a sign. The second is often there's a spouse or an in-law that's been brought in to do something that the owner either doesn't have time to do or doesn't know how to do. Bookkeeping, IT,
maybe marketing,
or social media kinds of things that they're being brought in because they know somebody. Now, true, sometimes it happens where they're not related, but oftentimes like, oh, my sister-in-law does this for so-and-so, so she said she'd do this. Or my spouse, my significant other, my wife is going to do the books for me, right?
Yes.
Those are the kinds of things where they start off doing those kinds of things. Eventually, they may grow out of that position, but maybe they hang on to it even though they brought in a professional. They just don't want somebody else involved, and so they become the quote-unquote CFO, or they become the person who's in charge of all accounting and all the banking relationships and things like that. So you start seeing those kinds of things.
Little
where it's
entries.
like, this isn't a family-owned business. Like, yes, it is.
It might be.
It's at least a family business, not a family-owned business.
Yes. Well, and when we're not intentional about designing the business to move in the direction as a family-owned, what are some of the challenges or I like to think of as consequences, but
consequences are good and bad, right?
Correct. Yes. Right. But what are some of those challenges if we're not pulling back and noticing or recognizing what might be some things that we're going to bump into that can create some serious friction down the road, possibly? Right. And some of it might be good, but some of it could be friction too.
Right. So when people make the decision to, let's son, daughter come in and do work, that's fine. Hey, by the way, I'm going to pay you this and I'm going to give you this many hours, or here's what's going on. One of the things that might be a negative consequence is how do the non-family member employees treat the family member? Like, can I correct them? Can I tell them that's not how we do it here? Can I coach them? Can I say anything? Or is this, that only conversation happens between parent and child? Or what if it's an in-law? And can I push back if I'm a non-family member employee? Maybe I've been around the business for 10 plus years.
On the leadership team even, maybe, right?
Maybe on the leadership team. And it's like, do I have the authority to do that without there being the drama that's created, which is a whole nother episode. We'll talk about drama.
Yes, very unintentional, but that drama can come in.
Right. And so with, how do we treat brand new employees that are family members? Are they brought in at the same pay scale that everybody else would be getting? Or is this, nope, this is a special thing and I'm just hiding their wages in this way so that I can give them money without it coming out through, I'm not paying taxes on it, it's a different thing.
Yeah.
Or it's usually non-intentional consequences are, how do non-family members see the family members? How do they treat them? How do I work with them? Can I correct them? Can I not correct them? The other is, as a parent or do you hold them to the same level of expectation that you do for everybody else? So if everybody else has to be there on time, that means 2 minutes before time. It doesn't mean an hour after. It doesn't mean 15 minutes late. It means on time.
Yes.
I have a friend who tells me he went to work for his dad, and his dad was working actually at a different company, right? His dad was working at a company, and so he was working for his dad, and he came 5 minutes late. He clocked in 5 minutes late, and his dad said, go home. He's like, why? You're late. I'm only 5 minutes late. 5 minutes late is late here. You're going home. And so, treating, setting the standard that day, that moment, it's like, that's how it is here. You don't get special dispensation. You don't get special privileges. And so...
But that could also swing to the other, though, too, right?
Right.
Where there's higher expectations. So maybe people aren't sent home, but the son or daughter has
to stay after. It has to work extra hours, or their expectations are higher.
Yes.
So there's two sides to this, right? There are two sides of, maybe we're lenient. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's only 5 minutes. Like, yeah, but you wouldn't let Joe be late, right?
Non-family.
Exactly. Or there's an expectation of higher standards. And, to some degree, I'm not going to disagree with, and I might not be popular on this podcast with this, but as a family member, we may recognize we've gotten the job or the opportunity because of who we are. But at the same time, we have to keep it. We have to prove ourselves that we have the right not only to have it, but we've earned the respect of other people. But so we sometimes have to work harder. We have to do a little bit extra to prove that it isn't just the blood that's flowing through me that got me the job. I have to prove myself that I can keep it.
Yeah. Well, and not only is it that we maybe they tell themselves that, but also sometimes the non-family members think or believe that about them as well. And so then that creates, I would imagine, that friction between employees with that family member.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
assumptions.
When we go in, when people, this episode is about, one, are you a family business or a family-owned business? If you're listening to this, majority of companies in the United States are privately held. So those privately held companies are there people within families that are working in the business of the ownership, right? Do they even recognize that? And have they put some things into place, which is...
kind of gets into the boundaries, right?
Yeah. So
structure, boundaries, expectations, but yes. So if we've let one individual, let's say there's a couple partners, we allow, and we don't think anything of it. We're like, oh yeah, your son can work here this summer. And the son works there, then proceeds to maybe continue working while going to school,
Right.
whatever that may be, right?
Right.
Now the other person,
Oh, well, and I'm just going to buy the truck out of the company or rent the truck, or we're going to do that. And it's like the kid's going to drive the truck. It's like, you know what that's going to do to your insurance? That's a whole nother story, right? Or the spouse is going to have a vehicle, right?
Yes.
Even though they don't work in the business. Well, that's part of the ownership family business tax that comes along with things,
yes,
right?
yes,
But I think that the sooner you put into place what many families call a family constitution or a code of conduct, where even before you even think about bringing on any family members, that does the family have to work someplace else
Some
before?
rules, boundaries.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just rules and boundaries that say, if you're going to be family and you're going to work here, you can work here part-time while you're going through school, but once you leave school, you have to go work someplace else to gain experience, to gain credibility, to gain perspective, because you might only know this business.
Correct.
Right? I think that understanding what what's the process for job descriptions and pay and meeting goal expectations? Are they the same or are they different than somebody else? Sometimes it's just having the conversation that is helpful, but documenting and say, this is the rules. Now, you may eventually decide to create some kind of a family council where you as a family decide that these are different for the next generation. But before you bring on any family members, I would go through and say, here's some standards that we're going to put into place. They're written, they're understood, and then as a family member considers it, it's like, oh, but by the way, you have another set of rules that you're following because you're family.
yes, yes.
Okay, and how we put those things there that I think they're super important.
Well, and I'm hearing, and also just from listening and being a part of as well, that's setting up for shared expectations and understanding as you move forward. So there's not frustration between, let's just say it's two siblings start a business, right? And now the two siblings are on the same page. So as they're both kind of identifying if they're going to embrace having kids work there or, even future, they already have a kind of a set of ground rules that they both agreed to before they're in the middle of it. Because what's the consequences what if it ripples where, okay, the first, let's just, the one person's already brought in two of their family members and now you've got another one's going to start, but it's starting to get a little wonky and they're starting to get some friction and maybe the individuals have been elevated and now they want their child elevated, but there's not a position. Well, like what are some of these things?
So it's so interesting, the founding generation, again, probably doesn't realize they've caught a family business until they realize their family's in it, right? And so having some boundaries, having some rules in place that is in conjunction with the organization's policies, procedures, and systems, right? So that's for Gen 2. If you don't have them for Gen 2, you have to have them before Gen 3 starts working in the business because a lot of times Gen 2 is coming in because we're still trying to build the business.
Yes.
By the time you get to Gen 2 and they are in their 30s or more, the business may be much more mature. You've got a lot of people who are non-family members working. But now you're talking about Gen 2 wanting to consider bringing in their kids. So now they're cousins. And so now how am I treating my cousins? Because now my brothers and my sisters aren't raising their children exactly the same way I am.
Oh, I'm sure not.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we have to recognize that, yes, you are a private business and you have policies and procedures and systems to create an understanding about how we do things around here. Having a family constitution or having some rules or a code of conduct about how we work as how family members are incorporated into the business and are their rules a little bit separate from everything else, I think is super important. But if you don't have them by the time you get through Gen 2, Gen 3 has to have them.
Well, and I'm thinking back on previous years working in a family business where I was not family. Talk to us a little bit about some of the consequences with behaviors. So as you're talking about family rules and behaviors, I mean, I had just experienced the first gen, the second gen, and it was not recognized when I was there that their behavior at work was the same behavior at home. So you had siblings, a couple siblings and parents, and the way they were communicating with each other, and we'll just say yelling and having tantrums was present in the business, which is totally expected. I mean, that's
at home that can happen.
Yes, but there were no boundaries set. And from your experiences, I mean, I know I have my one on this in this particular situation, but what's the consequences for the non-family? Because your non-family is also, especially as you grow, it's important, right?
So let's flip that, because you worked in the family business, but we're not family, but you witnessed all that. Like, what happened to your the rest of your leadership team? What happened to the people? Like, what were the things that they were talking about that, besides the morale killers, right?
Yes.
What were some of the things that happened?
Well, it became people didn't feel that they could approach or disagree with any of them, right? So it was people really. Well, I guess if we go to our words, the psychological safety didn't exist. It was awkward. It was uncomfortable, especially once we started, like one's yelling at the other one down the hall, and actually referring to him as dad versus dad's name, because that's one thing I know when I started with you all. People don't pick up on, or did not pick up on back then, that Wayne was your dad, because it was always Wayne. So at work,
the fact that we didn't have the same last name.
Yes,
if I had
helped.
the same last name, that would have been like clue number one.
Yeah, that would have been a little bit of a red flag for someone coming out of a
families where that's
dysfunctional
completely
one.
disrespectful. The Italian groups that I've worked with, they can't call their father by their first name. It is completely disrespectful in that family. It's got to be Papa, Dad, and that's the name. But just recognizing, there have to be rules.
Yes, because it's not just for the family either, and to reduce that chaos, but it's to reduce the chaos from rippling out to everyone else. I mean, it came to a point where I had to set the family down and say, we need some rules.
Right, because, exactly.
I can't, you want me to accomplish X by operating and managing this location, and I can't do that when I have all four of you randomly.
And you had to have the guts to do that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, very true.
But I believe that there are times that family members don't realize the impact that they're having on non-family members and their ability to perform the job. Now, do we recognize that in private businesses, there are still people who are not don't feel psychological safety?
Oh, goodness,
people who
yes.
have authority and things like that.
Yes.
You add to this that, we've taken what is personal and outside of work, and we incorporate it into work.
Yes.
And, do people recognize that is having an impact on others?
Yes.
When I look back at that, that's, one of the things that I love about Revela is that all of our folks have either owned their own business, have worked for a family business as either as a family member or as a non-family member, but witnessed it, or have been part of the family even though they weren't working in the family business yet. It was different generations and stuff like that. So, let's tie this episode up a little bit in a bow by saying, I can't believe I just said tie this up in a bow. I never say that.
If you would have just when you said that, I was thinking, I won't even say what I was thinking, but
I think people have to recognize that in a private business, the likelihood of them going to be a family business is pretty high. And so the sooner you recognize that that's the path you could or have gone down, put into place some rules about how family members will be treated, the expectations that you have of them. It can be something that you revisit every year and say, is this the right rule? Do we need to add to this rule? Do we need to change the rule?
And what was that called again?
Family Constitution or Code of Conduct.
Yes.
Any of those kinds of, you can call it whatever you want, but that's basically
yes. That's common.
Those are the common language that we talk about. And so we're going to do a couple of episodes on family business. So if this is the first one you're hearing about family business, we've got a couple more coming. Yep. And so thanks for listening to this first episode of the Leadership Hustle as it relates to family business. Please subscribe so you never miss another episode.